Your times. It is moved by the you should be done.
So she was excited. Friends like that, you know, and football and formal. But now they want to be fundraising it more than that night. And then they have the common stay in the hospital to make them 11.
We have a test
Like, I
on it.
can't.
No,
Week after 17th.
17th, okay. Awesome.
This will also have to like make weight, so you can't.
Great.
So this week we'll probably, I don't know.
So before we go on, I just wanted to show you this to confirm what I talked about on Monday. It was in Charlotte, as a matter of fact, Insider Magazine actually wrote about it.
Here's Charleston.
Oh, excuse me, I meant Charlotte, my bad.
It was Charlotte.
It was Charlotte, okay. So the area that was in, it's actually a suburb of Charlotte.
Near Valentine.
Yep, exactly. And so what they decided, they voted it out. They said, you've got to tear it down. All right, I mean, and Chick-fil-A, to their credit, rolled with the punch. All right. That means, you know, you cooperate with the inevitable and you find a way to turn it into something reasonable. And so Chick-fil-A developed this totally drive-in area and created walkways and public sidewalks into that area. And even more so, contributed $70,000 towards the price of a new traffic signal and other improvements. That's corporate responsibility. All right. I like that. I do. It's taking a bad situation and making it good. And so I thought I would just show you that when I talked about that Monday, it actually was true. All right. So we're going to take a little trip down memory lane, and I'm going to start with this person. And I would be stunned if anyone knew who this was without looking it up. Nobody will. Anyway, this person, I don't know if you even know the name, is Duncan Hines. So have you ever seen the name Duncan Hines anywhere?
Is he the dude that made ketchup?
Pardon me?
Is he the ketchup guy?
Actually, that's close. Duncan Hines, somewhere else. You'll find it where? Which aisle? Where? Baking aisle, right, exactly. You're close.
So he made baking soda or something.
Yes, he did. And as a matter of fact, this actually, he had lent his name by the mid-50s. Duncan Hines was a universally known individual. He had sold his name. His name meant quality to such a respect that just having something named Duncan Hines guaranteed your understanding of what quality was. Now, how is this possible? So Duncan Hines, when he was in his 50s, he was a salesperson driving across the United States in the 30s. So just imagine we're in the middle of the Depression. Not only that, but just try to imagine there are no Holiday Inns, there are no Ramadas, there are no fast food places. Every place you went to was a local motel or a local place to eat. And so driving, back and forth across the country, he decided that he would take notes, and he took very copious notes, very detailed. And it is amazing how much he accumulated. So he was at a cocktail party in the mid-30s, and friends looked at his notes and they said, Duncan, this is crazy. You have all of this information. You should do something with it. And his wife took all of his notes, typed them all up, which is just incredible, the amount of work. And he created a series of books. And so the books that he started were ones that were the first, I would say, the first real great influencers, for a lack of a better word. let's see where I'm looking. Okay, so he created a series of books. One of them was called Adventures in Good Eating, all right? Good eating places along the highways of America. And he also created a book called Lodging for a Night. And so he talked about what are the best places to spend the night, the hotels and the inns all across the United States. And I mean across the United States and including Mexico. So, but he did more than that. This is 100 years ago. This was, if he were living now, he'd be a YouTube influencer. All right. I'm serious when I say that too, because if you look at what he wrote, just to kind of give you an example. So there's the man. When he first wrote this book, by the way, you'll find that signature on every Duncan Hines cake mix that's out there. So this is his book. But one of the things that he also did as a good influencer is he talked about how to be smart about what is the expectation. So we all know this, an influencer you trust, no place listed has paid 1 cent directly for this. There is no space in this book for sale. All of this is my own labor. And, you know, all of this is kind of worth. He asked for people to write for support. And I love this part, okay? So what are the points considered? What qualifies for lodging for a night? So he lists 5 things that are important in a hotel. Cleanliness throughout, quietness, freedom from traffic, comfortable beds, courteous, adequate, and unobtrusive service, which is something very rare, and then hospitality, the quality of home-likeness that makes it easier. 100 years from now, we're here, it's 2023. I'm sure right now at hospitality and tourism, wherever they're teaching that, I'll bet you those 5 things still stand. I mean, that's, you know, an amazing thing. So the whole concept of influencers basically was created nearly 100 years ago, starting in the 20s and 30s. So I thought I'd also just kind of pull out. So this is where I'm from in Mississippi. So this is Biloxi, Mississippi, Buena Vista, it's still there, attractive, well-run, facing the ocean, 120 rooms, mostly with bath. That's what that means. 2-bedroom with bath, $5 a night, rates vary. So the White House has actually been rebuilt. It was torn down twice from hurricanes. Old hotel, the type that guests return to yearly, 114 rooms, 54 cottages, mostly with bathrooms, for $8 to $13. So the Broadwater Beach was one of the most magnificent ones. Open, 26 fine units, give voters to about everything the heart could desire. Everything beautifully done, kitchenettes, all rooms with bath. So just this is the kind, just these little notes, just little notes.
Was this in the 1930s?
1930s. Okay, so just think about it. If you were planning a long trip, like along Mississippi, and you had 6 cities in which to deal with, you could go here and find out which would be the best or safest place to go. In an era where you had no idea, I mean, the roads were like 10, 15. If the international, or let's just say the national highway system was less than a decade old by that time, and you really only had one route across the United States, and it was Route 66. All right. So anyway, this is kind of where it comes from. All right. So Duncan Hines is making his fortune, doing all of this good stuff. And he makes this post in 1938 about this place in Corbin, Kentucky. And it says, a very good place to stop en route to Cumberland Falls and the Great Smokies, continuous 24-hour service, sizzling steaks, fried chicken, country ham, hot biscuits, lunch, that's what that means, 50 cents to $1. And then for dinner, you had to spend some money, 60 cents to $1. Okay, I guess that was for sweet tea. Okay. This post took the owner of this place, who was living off of his Social Security checks, off. It launched the career of a particular person by the name of Harlan Sanders. All right. From this moment, he started to have money to seriously consider about where he wanted to go. And in 1940, he came up with a way of being able to cook chicken in a fast process. So he had his 11 herbs and spices, but he found that if he cooked it in a pressure cooker, if a pressure cooker, by the way, cooks at a reduced pressure, at a higher pressure, so that you can actually cook higher temperatures without boiling. That's what a pressure cooker does, all right? So it means it can cook faster, and he was able to maintain the flavor. Chick-fil-A in 1961 took the same process. I have never seen any connection between the two, who knows? But Chick-fil-A took it to sandwiches, all right, and really made it a fast food. So anyway, he does this process and he goes out on the road and tries to sell it to as many stores as he possibly can, as many restaurants. He is rejected 1,008 times. And then the 1,009th, he got accepted. And now there are 20,000 stores in the United States. And it all started from that one. So he started with his company stores. So the company stores were owned by KFC, but he also did franchise stores. But he was known as being very irascible, short-tempered, all right? So he was known to go into a place. This guy said everything he learned about how to be successful, he got it from this guy. And he said there's a couple of things that Colonel Sanders stood for. One of them was cleanliness, absolute cleanliness. He was known to walk into a place and would pull the franchise license if he saw dirt in any way, in any shape in the place. And the second thing is the quality of the ingredients. He absolutely demanded the freshest of the fresh. Only those two things would do. So this gentleman said everything he learned about succeeding in life, he learned from this gentleman. And he was an orphan. When he was 14 years old, he started working in KFC. He grew to be a manager. Colonel Sanders offered him to come up to corporate franchise, He learned everything he needed to learn in corporate. He decided he wanted to release his own franchises, and he started doing that. And then he became so good that he left KFC, made a big career change, and started his own franchise. And this individual's name, by the way, is Dave Thomas. And Dave Thomas is the person who started Wendy's. Dave Thomas was a great person. He was an orphan himself. The orphanage foundation that lives in his name still goes on.
And he passed away.
Yeah, passed away about a decade. Yeah, awesome guy, really was. All of the Wendy's came from the two things that he learned from Colonel Sanders, which was cleanliness and the quality of food. Those two things. The cup, by the way, Wendy's is named because his daughter had a developmental disability. My son actually had this. They are language impaired, and that's what my son was. At 3 years old, I think Deborah is her name. She could only say Wendy like that. And so that's her name, her nickname became Wendy. And yes, she does have red hair. She now owns 23 franchises, Wendy's, and she's still going on. And so this kind of a little interlude here is just give an idea of a couple of things as connections, how things work. And also just think about businesses and franchises when you think about your own networking. These are the kind of things that create career opportunities. And the franchise system was able to do this unique knowledge about how being able to create a successful franchise and how it can translate into something else, something big. Okay. So, yeah, it's a little interlude there. So we're going to talk about now strategies or franchise structures. I want to think of it. So this piece here is going to be about two different types of I should say three. All right. And then how things are tied together through contracts and their importance. Okay. So we're going to really talk about the two main types of franchising strategies. I've been talking about the business format franchise strategy, but there's one more, and it's the product and trade name. So let's not look at this slide any longer. We don't get anything from it. So let's go here and talk about what's called, oops, excuse me, I went once. This one, product, stay still. Stubborn. So, product and trade name franchise. So if you go to Mr. Tire, or you're trying to buy tires in Boone, there's a couple of places to go, and one of them is Mr. Tire. Mr. Tire is a franchise, but how could it possibly be a franchise and have a unique identity? It kind of goes against the concept of what a franchise is. Well, it's a product and trade name franchise, which is where the franchisor authorizes the dealer to sell the product or product line and use their trade name and do promotion with them, but not the business format. Okay. And so I am a strong independent dealer in one way or another. I'm modern Subaru, I'm modern Toyota. Those are trade name franchises. Those franchises, the franchisors get their money on the margins they sell the goods to the dealer. Now, important lesson from wholesale. They take title and possession. So they claim ownership. It means in this case, in the product and trade name franchise, they can set prices. Okay. When the franchisor sells the tires, in essence, other than some serious labor practice in one way or another, whoever the tires are, Michelin, Goodyear, Goodrich, Yokohama, I think those are the brands that they had. Basically, they have no way to set prices. And so Mr. Tire or another Goodrich store, they have the ability to have price wars because quite simply, the franchise has nothing to do with it. All right. Once they sell it, it's done. So if it costs $20 to make a tire and they sell it to Mr. Tire for $40, that's how they make their money. Their ongoing revenue stream comes from selling products, and that's it. And so at the retail level, tire stores, auto stores, household furniture. So if you go down the mountain into Hickory and you're looking at any of those places that are out there with furniture, with Royal or whatever, they would be a product and trade name franchise. And so is there a reason why it's that way? It's a good question. But if you look at the goods that are in a business format, those are fast moving consumer goods. They tend to be, over the counter sell quicks. So I'm not sure. I can't find what would be the delineating line, but it is by nature that some of those, I think those things, especially with substantial capital purchase, in the goods themselves and the products, that seems to lend themselves to that. And so the one that we've been talking about on Monday is a business format franchise. And that is a way of doing an entire line of business. The franchisee does make money, the franchisor does make money on selling unit goods that they're required to buy from the franchise for. But its primary source of income is a generation of the ongoing fees, royalties, And I guess you could say the generation of ongoing fees, you could put collectively the things that you gotta buy from McDonald's along with the royalty fees. Realize that also with this business format franchise, it's usually a collection of intellectual and property rights. So one of the things that just to give you an idea, my brother worked at Wendy's 20 years ago or whatever, he was an assistant manager. And they have a certain process for making their hamburgers. The meat is ground fresh, they're put in squares every day. The meat is thrown away at the end of the day, so they learn to be very efficient about the meat that they use. That is an intellectual property right, the way that that is performed. Even though they're not a franchise, Comeback Shack, I'm sure they have their own property rights or their own intellectual property that they use in the processing of their burgers. Everybody does. That's the good thing. And so usually you have use of a common name or sign. There is a much greater transfer of communication in the business format franchise because having that way of understanding business also means that you're monitored in your business much greater. The communication of know-how with tires at the store level may be greater than the knowledge that the corporates have. An individual who's been changing tires for 20 years, I'll listen to anything they have to say. And because the relationship in a general rule is much closer, there's some continuing provision of technical assistance by the franchisor to the franchisee. There's a connection. And so trade name franchises are basically one and dones, if you want to be honest. The contracts probably are very easy to get out of. There may be some stipulation or requirements that they remove, their trade names from all of their advertisements. That's probably true. But the connections with the business format franchise are much deeper, and they have to be that way for a reason. If you're going to show a successful way of doing business, then you have a plan, and that plan has to be constantly supervised. And so those are the differences between the two. So I don't want you to worry about this slide here. Once again, it's busy. Okay. Oh, it's getting hectic. So one of the things that ties together concept of trust but verify says, I trust you, but we're going to get it in writing. One of the things that hopefully produces success is the desire to tie things together with contracts. Contracts many times are the soul of success because they spell out explicitly what is expected from both sides in order to make success. The tighter the communications, by the way, and we'll talk about this in relationships, but the need, especially when in this kind of connection, communication is not only desired, it's essential. But even with that, contracts have to explicitly state what behavior is expected from both sides as well. And so the first thing is to look at the payment system and how this is run and how they're able to get money through the system. And I think for better, it's best to think of this in the business format way, okay? And so every franchise has a franchise fee, which is part of the initial investment, which they will not recover. Usually this is the upfront fee and the sunk cost in building the buildings And this is costs you never get back. And let me just say as a something to linger on the future, if you have to make choices and one of those is dealt on sunk costs, you'll never get them back. So you might as well move on. All right. Don't throw good money after bad. The ultimate hostage, and by this, you know, we say in the, so my wife and I work here together, and it's very difficult to even conceive of us leaving because we have to go somewhere and look for 2 marketing positions. It's called the golden handcuffs, all right? It's nothing bad about it, it's just that's the way it is. Well, when they say the royalty is the optimal hostage, I'm not getting on with that, but yes, the constant payment to the franchisors, that's a major. And the failure to pay those, of course, can ultimately lead to termination. Now, you will find that franchises and the desire to grow would actually withhold the franchise fee and the sunk costs just and take that back in royal payments just to give a lesser group a chance up. And so, especially if they're taking the risk. So if you remember on Monday, we talked about Heineken and Heineken willing to build a Pizza Hut in Thailand. I have no idea what he did, but I'm just guessing that there was a certain amount of negotiation with Pizza Hut saying, what do we got to lose? Yeah, just let them try and, you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And it worked marvelously to their success. And that other part of the royalty stream in a business format franchise is the tied sales. And so these are the sales of the goods that come in every once in a while, or hopefully every twice or 3 times a week, depending on the delivery, that comes with the goods that a McDonald's is required to sell. So, you know, 12 million, who knows? Oh gosh, I wouldn't say max it that way, but you know, sausage biscuits, who knows? Of course, I usually get the breakfast burritos because maybe the eggs are fresh. But anyway, all of those things, all of the goods that's used in the consumption, those are what are known as tied sales. Now, the reason, there's also a good reason why, is that you need to maintain quality and consistency across the spectrum, because it's not difficult to go in other areas where that I've traveled, and they'll maintain the level of quality is not quite exactly the same. That's another thing that, as I said before, that a franchise gives you the best surprise, which is no surprise. So these are how we go about paying to get into the system. And these are all tied up strictly with contracts. Now, so much in contracts has been refined over the years when it comes to franchising. Generally, the franchise contracts are like 10 years, even 15. They're long in distance, but it doesn't mean they just sign the contract and walk away for 10 years. You know, a lot is built into the contracts to ensure some level of success. So one of the things that's important in the contract is the leasing of real estate. And as I said before on Monday, a good reason why you do that is so that your franchisee is not overloaded with so many other things of capital needed. Well, there's another reason why. If you own the land that a building's on, then it makes your threat of termination credible. If I hold the right to lease the property to the franchisee, it means that that lease is a control point if disaster should happen and I should change. Now, it's not always disaster. I mean, certainly people and corporations move on. I mean, they are not infinite in their life. And so it is very reasonable sometimes for franchisees to move to newer individuals. not by just the loss of a contract failure. Sometimes it just happens, but that's also taken into account too. So it helps in one way because it reduces the capital requirement, but I have the power of eviction just in case. And believe me, that is a last resort. So what do we have when termination happens? First off, nobody, franchisor or franchisee wants a termination of a contract. As everything in channels, it's difficult, it's expensive, it's time consuming, but it happens. Through a failure, maybe to not make a payment, a failure to do the record keeping. And so the termination option is exercised by the franchisor, and then the franchisee has a few options. Usually in the contract, the franchisee is given the right to find someone to replace them. Now, it means that that individual to replace them has all of the requirements of the corporation in which, that they started with, all right? But if the franchisee fails to find a replacement, then they have to be charged a transfer fee, which is usually just to replenish the price, all right? The ultimate other final power is the right of first refusal. And so what this means is that if the franchisee finds someone, meets all of whatever the standards are or doesn't, but let's just say they are, it doesn't matter. If they do not believe that this corporation will carry on in the manner that the contracts demand, they have what's known as right of first refusal. They will match what the franchisee receives and they will take it over. And it'll become a company store until they can find a buyer. And as I said, this is a last resort. Nobody wants this thing. So what is in a good contract? You could probably take this slide and go into contract law, and these three things probably would be correct in just about every good contract. The first thing is that every contract needs to be the same, regardless of whether you own one store or multiple stores. Usually the contracts are not altered. And in other words, the franchisee is in a take it or leave it stage. And the reason why is that all comes down to fairness. Because perceived unfairness is corrosive acid to any relationship. If I perceive that you were dealing unfairly with me, then we no longer have a relationship. So you have a single contract, single price to all franchisees, offer, take it or leave it. They don't vary much over time and they treat franchises equitably, right? Not equally, equitably, which is a different thing. The next is contract enforcement. Usually influence is what is used in compliance. But the truth is that even if there's a violation of a contract, you're weighing the costs and benefits of punishing those acts of non-compliance. You tolerate a lot because nobody wants to go through it, seriously. Because mutual cooperation in the franchise system is so vital, you're willing, once again, to take a few nips. But how do you make sure that it works, right? It can't just be the hammer and everything. There has to be a velvet glove too. The contracts are usually written in such a way that incentives are given for proper behavior and that cheating is not in your best interest. And so this is a hopeful way of balancing the power between franchisor and franchisees and the other franchisees that are out there. The difficulty, of course, is that every time you balance power, you cause some new thing that will create imbalance. So it's usually a slippery act. But the one thing you don't want to do is ever go through and start changing contracts. Now, it's reasonable to change contracts on certain things that are no longer valid, like using e-commerce or using some kind of transfer system besides ACH, the automatic clearinghouse for federal deposits. Then, and in the modern world, you've got a lot more options and you can change the contracts for that. But the essence of the contracts need to remain the same in order to be fair. So I lived in a small town called Columbia, Mississippi for 20 years, 25, I can't remember. And the town was about 7,200. The town was a county seat. And so every day there would be about 20,000 people in the town itself, 2025. And at the end of the day, they would leave and they would all go to smaller outlying areas. So this little town of 7,200 had a McDonald's, it had a Burger King, it had a Taco Bell, it had a Sonic, it had 3 or 4 other things, and Wendy's wanted to come into this area. But the problem was Wendy's could not find anyone who was willing to put down the store. And so Wendy's corporate built that. And so that's what's known as a company store. And so a company store is a true vertically integrated market. The franchisee owns, the franchisor owns everything, and the franchisee is owned by the franchisor, which is totally vertically marketed. There are several reasons also why you put company stores in given locations, and one of them is just to be sure that you're monitoring an area properly. You may feel that you have to go take over a store just to protect your own brand equity. So if Comeback Shack ever became a franchise, this is the way it would start. They've got 2 company stores, one here and one in Myrtle Beach, excuse me. So if I were coming up with a strategy, I would find southern tourist towns, so Charleston, Savannah, Hilton Head, Pensacola, Jacksonville. I would use those as my, and can't help it, I'm a beach person, so I'm thinking beaches. Anyway, so I would start out with company stores, and once I got to a certain level, I'd start adding franchises. All right. You favor franchises over company units when you want the stores to grow fast, because the franchises, what they do, the franchisees bring capital. All right. And you're not having to pay all of that in order to make it work. So company stores have a lot of good reason to be around. They also can maintain that established together. You can also use them as measuring sticks against other franchisees in a given area. So you can know basically if I have a company store in Charlotte, let's say, and if the expectation is going to do a certain well, you expect that to be done pretty much everywhere else, or some measuring stick depending on the area that it's in Charlotte. They can become career paths. Once again, this is the KFC way in which Dave Thomas found his way ultimately to create Wendy's. So you have this movement. So if I have somebody corporate, Con Appliances actually did this in a certain way. When I worked with Con Appliances as a salesperson, I spent the first 2 weeks on a delivery truck working with other people to know what it's like to deliver goods. It was a great education. Well, for the same thing, a franchisor can send individuals down to the company stores, learn what it's like on the company side, and benefit in both directions. They complement each other. They make the chain stronger. They give benefits. they also become laboratories for testing new ideas. And so a company store can come out with, let's say, the first McRib, and they can do it in the company stores. And the franchisees do not suffer the disadvantage if those things bomb out. And so they also become laboratory experiments, and good ones too. So there are logical reasons to have company stores in there, and they don't necessarily damage the whole environment or the whole experience. So we're going to go past that one, and we're going to talk about ultimately trends in franchising. What are the futures, and where is, if there's any, best ideal? So the truth is that franchises have high failure rates just like everything else. But where failure rates in normal are before 4 years is 1 in 10, for franchises it's about 1 in 6. It's like 15%. 15% of all places succeed after 3 to 4 years. Doesn't seem like a lot for your money, but 1 in 10 is demonstrably better than 1 in 6. It is. What's the Mendoza line? Failure happens before 4 years. That's kind of the break-even point when you have enough unique knowledge to run the place. You have been able to capitalize your assets, so they've been amortized and out the door, so those are no longer expenses. And so you've got a chance usually about that. Now, pointing back to Duncan Hines and why influencers are so important, survival is also more likely when they can attract a favorable rating from a third party. And so this is what the first influencer, Duncan Hines, did. He created a positive atmosphere for Colonel Sanders. It helped him gain image as a legitimate player. And this 65-year-old man living on Social Security all of a sudden had a golden idea because he was recognized by someone who appreciated good ideas. And that's one of the great things about Duncan Hines. He was a symbol of quality, as and I say this even now. The brand name is so valued that it is 75 years since the man passed away and still looked upon as being so important. It is important to understand that you have to, in a franchise system, have a way of cooperating in order to achieve success. If you're more cooperative, they can be sensed that there's a solid relationship between each other. The system itself incentivizes corporate for the downstream partners to be successful. They've got to be that way. Now there is one goal conflict, and it has to do with each side's contribution and each side's outcome. And so if we remember agents, we haven't gone into agency theory. We'll talk about that in conflict, okay? But basically, they have two motivations still for being in business, even though franchises, they should. Franchisors seek to maximize sales. That's the key rubric for them, especially on the stock exchange. Sell more. So we're right back to the original goal and congruities. Franchisees seek to maximize profits. And so what that means is they want to be able to have as much territory as possible. So we're right back to some of those definitions. And they want to limit those new franchisees that might come in and encroach in their area. So this goes back to the old retailing idea of gross margin per square foot. If I can put one more person in a given area, I'll have more money. Well, the problem is, once again, the franchisors want sales and the franchisees want profit. Two different. Well, the one thing that you can do is you can offer new sites to existing franchisees. So in other words, if you're going to put a new one in, then check with your current list and see if anyone wants it. Which leads me to one other post here. Let's see. Let's see if I've got, okay. This guy right here. His name is Bobby Hughes. He makes me call him Robert. He and I went to school together at St. John High School in Gulfport, Mississippi, believe it or not. He went to Southern Miss like I did. He graduated in 1980. He was in my brother's grade, grading 2 grades above me. And he was a messy guy. Anyway, but he never washed his jerseys during practice jerseys during the whole football season. So you can stand his jersey in the corner. Anyway, enough on Bobby. I don't know why he doesn't return my phone calls. Anyway, so he went to North Carolina. He started at Domino's in the 80s. He started 2 Domino's. He started 3 Domino's, and now I think he owns 40 Domino's. So Bobby has done quite well. And I think especially when he opened the one at Camp Lejeune, I think that was the big one. And excuse me, Robert, when he opened it in Camp Lejeune, I think that's when everything took off. And so what this is nailing down to is that one essay question that you're probably going to have. And that is, what is the secret to success in franchising? And it has to be the whole concept of multi-unit franchising. Multi-unit franchising is when one franchisee, stay still. This thing, okay. Multi-unit franchising. Okay. The multi-unit franchising is when a franchisor has a single company that has multiple outlets. Okay, so this is the structure. You have one franchisor, you have a franchisee, and they own 6 different franchise outlets, but it's one company. Now look at the advantages this gives to the franchisor. For the franchisor, it reduces the enormous job of trying to manage hundreds of relationships, because all you have to manage is one. Just in this little 1 out of 6 combination, the number of people involved, you multiply by 6. Think of multi-unit franchises with 100, all right? That's what the things they can do. And it's also a good way of getting fast growth as well. The second is that it allows you to preserve knowledge that is gained by the franchisees. So let's just imagine, these are all in those locations I just talked about, and you had all of these Burger King franchises. It means that someone in Pensacola, when a job opens in Charlotte, could move there if they wanted to. It can mean that if you have someone leave to go somewhere else, it means that you can move someone from Charlotte to Myrtle Beach in a temporary manner. Now, also think about this. You consolidate the unit costs that you have to have involved as well. It means that you can have 1 or 2 trucks rolling, not at every location. You could use one as a central warehouse and use the rest of them to distribute. You have enormous advantages. You have the possibility of keeping the knowledge if you can move those individuals back and forth across the system. And that is the success, or that is the greatest way of achieving success in the franchise environment. Standard format without Chick-fil-A involved. So if you see that in an essay question on the test, the answer is multi-unit franchising is the best or the key to success in franchising for the, well, no, it is not just the franchisees, it's the franchisors as well. Once again, the economies of scale work, they work well, and it's a great way of making it work and complete everything. Okay, we are done with chapter 7. We will wrap up chapter 9. We will not be here Monday, just to remember that. We will not be here Monday, all right? Won't be here Monday. I will be on my way back from Louisiana. I'm going to Covington to go see my brother for Easter. Have a great Easter break. Test will be on the 17th. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.